Tom J is from OJ, California, and his home group is Spiritual Madness. He will be speaking on miracles of mental health for 45 minutes, followed by a 20-minute Q&A. Tom, it's an honor and a privilege having you with us today, and we thank you so much for setting aside the time to share your life with us. Welcome.
Welcome and good morning. Thank you. Morning, everybody. Morning. Tom, grateful alcoholic. And I'm going to tell you in a minute why I use that word. You know, it's obvious that I'm not grateful that I was an alcoholic, but I am grateful for the opportunities that my alcoholism provided me once I got here. I'm grateful where I get to go, certainly not where I came from. So I like to unpack that for you, that why I'm a grateful alcoholic. Thank you so much for inviting me. What a lovely format. I so appreciate all the readings. And I signed on early, and I got to hear some lovely recovery, and it was a pleasure. It was a meditation in itself. Thank you. You know, quite often I have this thought before I ask to share, and that is, how am I going to spend my time with you? And usually what happens is, as I'm thinking, something floats to the front of my mind that says, Tom, this version of you I had no idea existed. The guy who you're seeing right now, who's talking, I had no idea existed. I didn't know him. I never met him. And who knew that he was in here someplace? Now, I'm going to make a presumption that I believe that that's the same for all 47 of you in this meeting. I believe that's true. I believe you've all been introduced to a version of you didn't know existed. And hence the reason for the title of the meeting, or at least on the flyer, you know, it says I was going to talk about mental health. Well, isn't that quite an unusual topic for a meeting? I mean, how often do you get to hear that? So I just came full circle as to how I'm going to best spend my time with you. What can I share with you about, you ready? My recovery that gives you the impression that I have that this version of me never existed. And my debt of gratitude to you and all the poetry and philosophy that's in both the Big Book and the 12 by 12. I'd like to start off why I choose this topic. If anybody has a Big Book, if you turn to page 133, it says in here, and you don't have to take my word for it. It's in the book. And if you'll embellish me for a minute, I'm going to read it to you. Also, there's another little hidden sentence in here that I'm going to take a moment to unpack. It says, we who have recovered. Oh, we all know that's a controversial word, right? The ED part, recovered. Like, we've heard that ever since we've been sober. I'm not, you'll never recover. But it says in here, actually it says recovered 13 times. Well, really 12 times. The 13th time is about gastritis, but that's still related to the consumption of alcohol, right? But here it says, we, you and me, who have recovered from serious drinking. It doesn't mean I've recovered from the ism. It doesn't mean I've recovered from the causes and the conditions, which is, leads us to another place in the Big Book, that our drinking is but a symptom. Our real problem are the causes and the conditions, which through your love, friendship, and caring, I've eventually got around to working on those causes and conditions. But here it comes. Here's the sentence. But let me just reread that one. We have recovered from serious drinking. So now we know the puzzle to the word why a beautiful wordsmith like Bill Wilson used the word ED. He doesn't say that, we're amazing and everything's, sunny and rosy and it's great again. We didn't recover from being human beings. Being a human being is a messy job. We all know that. It's a messy job, especially in this day and age. So it says we have recovered from serious drinking. That's true. I didn't drink yesterday. I haven't drank, for those who don't know me, for 36 years. I'm coming up on an anniversary soon, and I'm here nearly 4 decades. Wow. The very next sentence is, we are miracles of mental health. That's on page 133. I have to point that out, because what I'm about to say next, I don't think it's necessarily controversial, but it's questionable to many, not to me. I don't believe, and I'm going to embellish here a little, that any one of our 51 people in this meeting have gotten here because of their past. Oh, now wait a minute. How crazy is that? Right? I mean, even myself, my 4th DUI, 23 hours after my 3rd in a car that wasn't mine. It almost sounds like that helped me get here. But the truth of it is, I believe everybody's here because they're being pulled into their future. And that's why I started off by saying I had no idea this version of me existed. And that's been the case over 36 years, multiple times. I keep meeting somebody I had no idea existed. No idea. And some of those obvious points would be kindness, forgiveness, peace of mind. Forgive people who wrong you because see where they're spiritually sick. That spiritual axiom part of the program. This guy who's talking right now, I could have missed. I had no idea he existed. I defended myself. I like to say I defended this asshole who was trying to kill me most of my life. It was me. And it was mostly due to arrested development. I had no idea the depth of my ignorance, arrogance, pea brain. I lived, oh my God, talk about self-absorbed, which, we know is one of the major problems of the alcoholic. He's preoccupied with himself. I have seen the most amazing people, amazing mothers, amazing fathers, employers, employees, friendships. The most amazing people I've met on the planet are in our tribal circle of these 12 steps. As I was logging on, I was hearing someone talk about numbers and about how many people in the UK might be alcoholics or the percentage of them. And I'd like you to think for a minute, how many people in Europe are in a meeting right now in this tribal circle where people are trying to pay attention to improve the quality of their life? Anybody got a number? Just curious number. Europe. Could it be 10,000? Possibly, right? And traditionally there's 3 meetings a day. So what are we up to now? Maybe, Tony, you have an answer? No? Okay. Maybe, so that's 30,000 a day. Now how about India, where they love AA? Russia? How about South America? How about the United States? How about globally? How many people right now are sitting in this tribal circle talking about consciousness? And then I want you to times that by 365 days. All of a sudden, there are more people sitting in our tribal circle because of these 12 steps, improving the quality of their life or their human condition. That's why I say you're the best people I've ever met. And as a result of being sober, I should preface it by saying this first, because I'm about to tell you a little of my recovery. But it's important that I tell you that I got here on a bicycle with shit in my pants and drug soles on my face. I'm an 8th grade dropout with a 3rd grade education who was born to a prostitute in New York City, 3 months premature. And I spent most of my life in really violent foster homes because I just wasn't the kind of kid you were going to adopt. I tell you that because as a result of coming to these rooms and being introduced to qualities I had no idea existed, I have been privileged over these 36 years to travel the world many times, from the base camp of Everest, where I met an 80-year-old Tibetan Rinpoche who knew more about the phenomena of this spiritual movement than anybody I had ever met. He even told me, go home. It's easy to be spiritual on the mountaintop. Now go try and do it with a newcomer or a wet drunk. To a tribal wedding for a sponsee on top of Machu Picchu. To just a couple of days ago flying in formation in old World War II planes. Holy mackerel. I never went anywhere. I got here on a bicycle. Everything I owned was in a plastic bag. So that's why I'm telling you, this version of me I had no idea existed who's talking right now. You introduced him to me. And that's why I'm convinced that this version of you, maybe you didn't know existed. And to me, that's the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, early on, my sponsor was so adamant about about pointing me in the direction of where I was going, not where I was coming from. And I have to tell you, that was a little daunting and frightening because, like it says in the 12 by 12 in step 4, it says, we're afraid. We're afraid to move on. We're afraid we're going to be the hole in the donut. Who would I be without my misery? And I have to tell you, I was addicted to suffering. I made a career out of it. Don't you know who I am? I'm illiterate. Don't you know who I am? I don't have parents. Don't you know that my whole life growing up, they poked their finger in my chest and said, don't waste any time with this kid. He's not going to amount to anything. Until I got here. My sponsor took 2 years out of his life every Wednesday to teach me how to read and write at the age of 30. And it's fair to say that I'm stringing enough sentences together right now that I'm no longer illiterate. Whoa! Where did that come from? How did that happen? I have to tell you, this guy, this version of me, keeps introducing me to aspects of being a human being I didn't even know existed because I was too busy suffering. I was suffering under the weight. Well, the bigger umbrella would be arrested development. But I was suffering under the weight of less than, insecurity, envy, jealousy. I had no identity, zero. I don't have any credentials on my wall today even. You know what? I can happily tell you I finally have arrived in respect to that I'm nobody. How cool is that? I'm finally nobody. I don't have to defend, posture up, position. Where does that happen? How does that happen? That takes us back to page 133, that we are miracles of mental health. Now, I could really entertain you guys from those 14 violent, really perverse foster homes in New York City to the age I got here at 30 with a lot of good stories, but I think I'd be wasting your time. I'd rather share with you what you've done to me and where we're going. And that's why I believe that people who get here are being pulled into their future. I've seen it. I'm one of those crazy guys that, I'm in and around AA people, 12-step people every day. I just finished a tradition study with several of these guys that are in the meeting right now. Last night I got to participate in a meeting in LA. There's a couple wonderful people here like Jason who invited me out, and I just got to participate with my family, you guys in New Zealand, live. I couldn't put 2 cents together, let alone a sentence. So I'm trying to share with you little sort of tidbits of what I mean when I say we're miracles of mental health. What does that mean? Well, the most obvious one is putting myself at the top of my 8th step and forgiving me. It means learning about forgiveness for others. And most of all, it means literally practicing the second part of the 5th tradition. What is that? I have to tell you before I say what is that. I'm sure everyone knows here what's the second part of the 5th tradition. I have to tell you, my first decade in sobriety, I turned my recovery into an addiction. Is that possible? Well, I didn't find time for other people. Don't you know how important I am and I got things to do and I'm getting sober? Don't you know I'm stressed out? Don't you know I don't have a job or I don't have 2 shoes that match? Don't you know? So I really was afraid to move on. So I turned my recovery into an addiction. And my sponsor said, Tom, we don't come to AA to live in AA. We come here so we can have a brilliant life outside of AA, and most of all, to be of service to others. And inherent in that equation is the secret to growth. In a wonderful talk in 1947, Bill Wilson said he had to lose his life to find it in the life of another. There's an equation there that's magical. The alchemy inherent in that has rocketed me, Bill Wilson likes to say, at the 4th dimension. It has rocketed me into a person I had no idea existed. And I think that's probably why I got loaded. I was trying to change who I am. And now it's happening almost organically. Guess why? Because I'm not a liability to myself anymore. I'm not hurting you. I'm not stealing from you, especially your attention or affection. I'm reasonably congruent with what I say is what I mean. And I have to tell you, at 36 years sober and 65 years of age, I have a sneaky suspicion it's still just the beginning. You know why? Because it's a 24-hour program. Every day is like, whoa, who's that guy? Why is that? Because of the practice. Instead of creating messes, I'm involved with magical things. Like, I've had a lot of young, sober people live on my property. One of them was a friend of mine's daughter, who we dragged her out of a drug hotel, and I put her in, a little tiny house on my property, and she had twins. They were 5 years old. And she just took 8 years and got her master's in psychology. And those boys are now grown up and healthy. And whenever I see her, she's laughing out loud. And the boys are remarkable because they have a mother whose her greatest asset is a sober mind. She's present for them. I have to tell you, I'm so grateful that AA is not just about not drinking. I'll say it again. You're the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life. And I'm not being Pollyanna. I am who I am because you took time out of your life so I could have one. The adventure here for me has 100% been about mental health. And as we get towards the end of my pitch, I think you'll agree with me. I'm just not pontificating. I had enough pontificating early in my sobriety when I was learning to read, and I thought I would impress you and be able to recite things in the book. Well, it turns out I had no idea, but I have a photographic memory and I didn't know that. So it was easy for me to pontificate until one day my sponsor said to me, "Hey, Tom, nice recipe, kid, but now cut me a slice." Oh, man. I was a good bullshitter. As I think unintentionally most of us are when we get here. Because when you're bankrupt, I'm not talking about the heavy drinker. To qualify to get here, the bankruptcy that Bill Wilson talks about is a soul bankruptcy. I think he says it's a cancer of the emotions and maybe even of the soul. You know, this growing up stuff has not been easy. To be honest, it was a lot easier when I was living on my bicycle. I didn't have to lick no stamps. I didn't have employees. I didn't have a home. Look behind me. There's things there with art on the wall and books. Who knew that this version of that guy existed? 100% the result of the 12 steps. I wish I had the problems I had when I was new because they were managed, they were easy. These real life problems, like learning to forgive. My neighbor's son who shot my pet of 15 years. Yeah, you want to practice forgiveness? There's one for you. Or how about admitting to you when I do something wrong? Or how about learning to take care of this instrument, which you taught me? How about learning to be a friend? And how about learning to eat right? How about learning to read other materials like it says in the book, you know? This adventure, and that's kind of what I'm trying to point out, is far more exciting than telling you my drunk-a-log. Now listen, I understand more, just as much as anyone, that the newcomer needs to identify with my drinking story. Absolutely. But AA is not a treatment center. We don't say anywhere in this book, don't drink. We actually say, go across the street and get it on. Because there's nothing worse than getting here a six-pack short. It's brutal. It's brutal to get here a six-pack short. It's tormenting. So, the last couple of years of my sobriety, I've been spending a lot of time sharing with you who I am currently. It's very easy for me to slip in to some very hilarious, ridiculous, funny, embarrassing stories of me when I was a drunk. But I would walk away after this meeting was over feeling like I did you a disservice. Because everything in this book is designed to succeed. Everything in this book is brilliant as it relates to the alchemy. I like to say this, that AA is a wonderful place to come and die, metaphorically speaking. And I needed to die on many levels. And we all know what I'm talking about, the ego, right? This sense of I, this personality, this identity, it's really overblown. It's really overstated. And that's what I mean by it's nice to be nobody again. When I got here, I was nobody. And I drank over that. And now who's to know that there's so much room inside of me now? Because that self-absorption, like a sponge, has been wrung out. So now there's room for learning. I never owned a book in my life. And I'll tell you something. I never had time for you. Some people in this room know that there's probably been about 7,000 alcoholics on my property over the last 30 years. I have this big annual meeting. I tell you that because I'm a productive member of society now. I know how to have friends because I have friends and I know how to be a friend. All of these things helped Humpty Dumpty to fall off the wall. You cracked me open. And then I had the painful experience of learning how to do all these things. I had to learn how to be joyful. I had to learn how to be honest. I had to learn words like integrity. Now I got to tell you, it's a lot easier to play the violin and do the poor, pitiful story about, oh, my mom was a prostitute. Oh, I never went to school. Oh, you poor me, poor me, poor me, poor me. And I got to tell you, those poor me's were real. If I was new in the meeting today and I was talking, I couldn't hear a word this guy is saying. Because don't you know my teeth hurt? I don't have two shoes that match. But I'm here because people encouraged me. They encouraged me. They said things like your life would get better. I would say, yeah, but you don't understand. My teeth hurt. And then I'm going to share a story with you. Early in my sobriety, you guys made me get a job. That was terrible. And about the only thing I was qualified for was a graveyard shift in the middle of Los Angeles, hitting tires on trucks with a pipe to make sure they were inflated with air. So when the truck drivers came to pick them up, they can take them to the harbor. That's what I was qualified for. And one day driving home after the graveyard shift, I got hit by a drunk on my motorcycle. A motorcycle, by the way, that somebody in the program gave me. Ended up in the hospital and had some serious accident, surgery, a knee and shoulder. And because I don't have family, I started to slip into this real pitiful place. And on the fifth day, a meeting the size of this one, my morning group, all showed up in the hospital room. And at the age of 32, it's the first time I ever spontaneously cried. I couldn't even stop myself. I had to bury my face in the pillow because I was embarrassed that I was having a feeling. The best part of that story is, you guys, after they left, by the way, they came every day after that. But they missed me. They didn't see me in the meeting. What happened to Tom? I can tell you I didn't grow up with that. Nobody cared where I was. But I don't know, 7 days after that or something, I'm ready to get discharged. And the surgeon comes in, he goes, you're doing well. Everything looks good, but I just want to comment. You sure do have a lot of friends. He says, what I don't understand is how come nobody doesn't know your last name? Hey, we're here to see Tom. Tom who? I don't know. He's a really good friend of mine. And that's been my experience. And that's why I stay here. That big word, Love. I don't know where else on the planet that complete strangers care about one another. I know that nobody in this room wants anybody in this Hollywood Squares to drink. I know that. Where does that kind of empathy come from? It gets nurtured in those 12 steps. There's another version of me I didn't know existed. I was so self-absorbed that I didn't even know what the word empathy was, let alone probably spell it. And today, it appears as though it's a part of my nature. And I've been working with people for 3+ decades that I discovered it's not even mine. It's a part of human nature, and I think Bill Wilson knew that. The second part of the fifth tradition. Get sober and what else? Help someone else. I think the two greatest assets in my life are my sober mind and my innate, intrinsic desire to want to be helpful to others. And we all know that's not convenient. There's a saying, service isn't service unless it's inconvenient. So part of my intention in this pitch is to direct the focus more towards getting out of self and being of service to others, because in that equation is the prize of mental health. Contemplating my navel did nothing for me. It was just kind of like maybe putting my feelings in a crack pipe. I was so preoccupied, self-consumed, that there was no way I was ever going to get off the runway and launch and grow and mature and become a 65-year-old man. I can tell you I didn't think this way when I got here. I don't know where else this happens. Nobody's in charge. We don't own anything. We're actually one of the most brilliant democracies on the planet. So much so that you're allowed to suffer at your own pace. My sponsor said to me, Tom, turn your life into a meeting and then you don't have to run to one. You know what he was telling me really? To practice. He was trying to convince me to practice and not turn my recovery into an addiction. Now I'm a daily meeting goer, you know. I got way too many sponsees. I happen to know the material really well. I spent a good 10 years in Bill Wilson's library, upstairs at Stepping Stones, working my way through his library. I had no idea that one day I would own books or even be literate. And I could probably tell you what page, where, when, and what anything's on, but I also had to be reminded that this is about attraction, not promotion. So at the end of the day, I just tell the guys I work with, watch my feet, not my lips. And if you find a contradiction, point it out to me. Because today I'm open to growing. Because it's better than getting high. It's better than getting drunk. I had no idea growing could be so exciting. I had no idea that friendships could be so amazing. I had no idea that being transparent, or a better word, congruent. I had no idea. Because I was addicted to suffering. Legitimately, right? I mean, I had really good reason. You heard that. And today, I'm totally fascinated. When I'm privileged to take someone through the steps or open my home up to a newcomer. You know, I'm still an 8th grade dropout with a 3rd grade education. I don't have any agency, but yet the majority of my sponsors are, you know, they're either heart surgeons or Wall Street guys or even a billionaire. And I got to tell you, some people are so poor, all they have is money. Here, we learn what it's like to be a human being. And that's not easy. That's a hard job. It was a lot easier when I was on my bike. So I'm taking a risk, you guys, at sharing with you my recovery. Because when someone else did what I'm doing right now, it was the first time in my life I felt inspiration. And I didn't even know what that word meant. Nobody told me I was going to amount to anything. I didn't have a career or a profession. I was never told to do this or do that. I was invisible. I'd like to share something with you that I questioned if I was going to do it or not, but I think it's really important as it relates to recovery. Globally, we all had a tough time with COVID. I lost, which 7 of the most important friends of my life. One was a woman who had my heart. And then it shut my business down completely for 2 years, not a penny. And I was afraid I was going to lose my home. And that means a little more to me than most because I never had a home. And that produced so much anxiety that I got shingles. And then the shingles compromised my health. Next thing you know, I'm diagnosed with cancer. And next thing you know, they cut a part of my tongue out and they cut my neck 9 inches and took out a bunch of stuff. And you know what? Because of the quality of life that I've had here, do I look like I'm suffering? Unfortunately, the cancer has come back, and it'll have its way with me. They like giving people like me an expiration date. But could you imagine if I had missed this version of me? I've been so overpaid, you can take me right now. You helped me clear away the wreckage of my past. Boom, mental health. Here's the biggest one. Relieved of the bondage of self. I think that's the whole thing here, right? Natasha knows that. It's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. Johnny knows that. George knows that. Nicole knows that. Greg knows that. Jill knows that. Relieved of the bondage of self. But be careful, because then the big job really starts. Like I said earlier, learning to practice forgiveness starts with yourself. Learning to care about other people. I can't say it enough. I am who I am because you took time out of your life so I could have one. And I could have missed this. I've become somewhat of a historian. I have a huge archive collection of really amazing stuff that really should be behind a glass case at World Services on 120th and West Side. But instead, I've been giving it away to all of my dearest friends who are bigger to me than family. Who's to know after doing a couple of 100 fifth steps that I might have been lucky not having a family. Right? Who knew? I mean, I hear you guys have to unpack stuff with your family, which is probably the biggest dynamic in the 4th step and 6th step. And who's to know? I mean, I never knew that one day I would say, hey, maybe I got lucky. Who knew, right? There's a plaque hanging up in Bill Wilson's library at Stepping Stones. I don't know how many in our meeting now has been there, but I think I'm going to end my pitch by reading it, if you'll embellish me. We read it every Tuesday night in my backyard at our spiritual madness meeting, which is candlelight, and it's not over till the last person shares. And we started off with a sound bowl, and then we read this. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude, to me, is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think, say, or do. It's more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home, a relationship. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in certain ways. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing that we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitude. Thank you for my life. I realize there's 10 minutes left, but I really don't want this all to be about me. And so let's move this on and make this community and involve others, if I can do that.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Tamara. I'm an alcoholic. So we're going to get rolling with the QA. Let's see some hands, people. Questions for Tom. And first up will be Terry. If you could put your camera on, that would be great, Terry. All right, perfect. And I've asked you to unmute.
It's very hard for me to put a camera on.
That's okay.
I have 30 days. I had gathered 303 before that, but I had one day of a slip and back on. I've been going to meetings. I'm 61 years old now. I had close to 20 years starting back in 1990. It's really hard to be my best version of myself. And I have trouble walking. And I don't want the poor me. I've worked a lot with pain management and trying to plug into just conscious contact and unburden the bondage of self. But this body is so hard. And my teeth hurt. And I can't at this point leave the house, nor particularly have the energy to shower. So I feel really hard to have self-love. So I need help. What can I do? And I don't have a sponsor because I really can't get out and I try to make connections. And I need help.
All right. Thank you, Terry. Before Tom responds, we have a meeting after the meeting, a parking lot meeting. So I would encourage you to stay after. We could offer you sponsorship, a big book if you need one. And please stay so we can get to know you a little bit and offer you some support. Tom, did you have anything?
I do. Hi, Terry. Welcome back. And I don't want to sound quaint, but I think you answered your own question. You're here, right? You came online. You're here. You opened your mouth and you exhaled. And you shared with us, you're here. As you were talking, I'm saying, wait a minute, she's answering her own question. What can I do? You just did it. And sometimes it's 1 minute at a time, 1 hour meeting at a time. And thank God there is Zoom now. And I'm convinced that everybody in this room, is sending you a good vibe at the moment because we don't even know you and we care about you. So I just want to tell you you're doing the right thing just by being here. It sounds simple, and quaint, but I'm convinced.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Next one, I had one that came in from the chat. And Can you explain what they're talking about in the first step in the 12 and 12, where it talks about complete defeat, a warped mind, and an unmanageable life? And where is my unmanageability?
Wow, here we go again, right? To bring this to the very present, just like Terry. What's so fascinating about that question being asked? Linguistically, when you're not so troubled with your suffering, you can hear what Bill Wilson's writing. For me, the most important word in the first step is HAD. And the very fact that you're present enough to ask that question, it says our lives had become unmanageable. Once you get to the watering trough, if you're thirsty and you don't know where the water is, I get it. But once you know where the solution is, that's why he used the word HAD. Our lives had become unmanageable. Because you're here. And your other part of the question was about the bankruptcy. I think we spoke to that earlier. AA is not a treatment program. And I love words now, from somebody who couldn't read. And I have to tell you, there's some funny things that somehow work their way into the folk tale of AA. And don't take my word for it, you can look it up. Bill Wilson never spelt the word out. It's not in the big book or in the 12 by 12. He never spelt the word surrender. Doesn't exist. But yet we talk about it all the time. You got to surrender. You can look it up. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. It's not in here. It may be in the back of the stories, but he never wrote it out. Why is that? Because it's a program of action. And because of that, when is anyone ever motivated to do action? When they're bankrupt. We said it earlier. There's nothing worse than getting here a six-pack short or a line short. Nothing worse. It's tormenting. We're not a treatment center. We actually say, go across the street and get it on. Go get it on. So please don't think I'm cold or insensitive, but I tell a lot of guys, I say, listen, man, if you're uncertain, just go across the street and get it on. I'll be here. And if you're going to drink, call me up. I'm not going to talk you out of it. That's not our job. We carry the message and not the mess. And AA works when you bring something to the table. And what is that? Willingness. So yeah, surrender thing is like the word recover. It's a big deal, right? But I haven't been able to find it in the big book in 36 years. It's semantics, and you can argue it. I'm done arguing. We stop fighting people, places, and things. I hope that helped.
All right. Thank you, Tom. That's great. Let's see. Yeah, it says in the first step in the 12 and 12, complete defeat, not just defeat with alcohol, right? Complete defeat.
We know what complete success is, right? We know what that is. We're all striving for it. What is that?
Right. So, Mel, would you like to come in?
I'm Mel Collick.
Hi, Mel.
Mine's got a simple question, Tom. I was wondering if you would mind sharing with us what you put into action to avoid your program becoming an addiction. I think that's how you said it. Is that how you said it?
Yeah, that's right. I turned my recovery into addiction.
Recovery into addiction, yeah.
Well, first, I had to recognize I was doing that. And one of the first things that was my clue was I was envious and angry and jealous of those people who were laughing, like maybe I am now. I didn't realize how attached I was to my old narrative. And I had to break that, but there was so much fear. It was fear for me to move on. It was fear for me to go pick someone up that was a wet drunk. It was fear for me to make coffee, or back then when I got sober, to clean ashtrays. It was difficult for me to get outside of myself enough so I could start to grow. I would have preferred just to keep telling you where I came from. And it's a pretty goddamn good story. But it held me in bondage to self. I had to do things that really challenged me. And I think that's what this work is. When you write out that fourth step, it's tough, the fourth step. Taking ownership of the sixth step is tough. I happen to believe the seventh step is the hinge that the whole program swings on, because it starts off with talking about character development. So it's already talking about changing the narrative. I don't know if that was a good enough answer for you. I do know that getting sober, it says that, I think, in chapter 2, when it talks about the ship, the captain, and we're on the boat, and we survive the wreckage, the steerage from captain's table, something like that. And it says, if you think sobriety is enough, you're just not thinking. The real work begins when you start polishing the rough edges. Not easy. And by the way, we need friends to do that. Today, I'm open to peer criticism. Whereas before, I would have crushed you if you'd said something and hurt my feelings.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Awesome. So I think Zara has a question. Would you like to come in, Zara? All right, we'll move on. Rasa, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Tamara. Hello, everybody. I'm Rasa, alcoholic. Thank you for this share. And thank you for describing more on bankruptcy. Because we always talk about bottom. But bottom doesn't describe it very well. And spiritual bankruptcy, it's just to the T. My question is, you haven't talked much about the higher power and God in your recovery, in your journey to recovery. That doesn't mean that it wasn't. And I just would like to hear more about it, if that's possible.
Wow, thank you. It's a very personal and intimate experience in life to have a God that lives within. When I got here, I actually resented churches and theology and anything to do with, organized religion, because on the streets of New York, if you wanted to earn a living or $5 for a meal, you just go to the back of the church. And, there's enough perversion that happens there. You get what I'm saying. I made my living growing up on the streets of New York. But when I got here, and you introduced me to something greater than myself, I started having experiences outside of my living experiences. They were involutionary ones. What I mean by that is when I wasn't so preoccupied with myself, like that sponge I talked about earlier, when a sponge is filled with water, it's heavy. And all the canals inside of the sponge are congested. But when you wring out a sponge, it's very light. And then things can pass in and pass out. And God had no chance of coming into my life until I got rid of being self-absorbed and self-obsessed. I went on a little further because I learned to read and write from the big book. People like Carl Jung and Herbert Spencer and William James were like my beginnings. So I moved on to reading things and studying and finding the mythology in theology, from the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Old Testament, King James, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I lived in a Buddhist monastery at the base camp of Everest, where I think I told you I met an old Tibetan Rinpoche monk. Today, my God, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous, is one of my own understanding. And my sponsor would say to me all the time, Tom, stop being so selfish. God does not work in your life. And I go, wait a minute, that's what everybody's saying. He says, it's about time you start working in his. Go drive those guys in the recovery home to a meeting. Go help an old timer clean up their garage or move to another place. Now that you know how to read, go teach somebody else how to read. Practice, 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 practice. So for me, God comes to me when I'm practicing, not when I'm asking for things. You want to pray to have a mountain moved? Great. You better bring a shovel. So, yeah, I could talk a lot about theology and the wonderful. Now today I love prayer, and today I'm not prejudiced in any way, and I love participating in rituals, whether it's dervish dancing or a newcomer taking me to a church of his choice. I'm open. I think it says that in AA. We become open-minded. I'm not that ignorant, knuckle-dragging Neanderthal that walked into these rooms 36 years ago. Did that help?
Thank you, Tom. Awesome. Appreciate that. All right. I have somebody that is going to wake us up.
Uh-oh.
He's already laughing. Happy, joyous, and free. Come on in, babe.
Hi, kids. I'm Babe, and I am an alcoholic. Yeah, I had it years ago. A young girl came up to me, Babe, you're just so damn happy I want to punch you. I didn't know how to respond. All I could think of to do was give her a hug. If you're I'll have a bad day if it'll make you feel better. And this goes to my question. Recently asked this one. Babe, what do you do when it all goes gray? I didn't know how to answer it. I said, it has never gone gray. Well, your description of religion. I get closer and closer to God. I get to see God at the absolute certainty my Creator's entered my heart and lives in a way that's indeed miraculous. That ain't boring, kids. So, has it gone gray? What do you do to get yourself back into the sunlight?
Wow, that's such an amazing question. Thank you. Are you ready? Who knew? I'm gonna quote something that most of the guys on this meeting know I'm known for saying. Lean into the sharp points. The gateway to growth is always through adversity. Bill Wilson says it's the kink in the armor. I had no idea that some of the great musical compositions or inventions or human progress or even Gandhi's spiritual experience on the train. Here is a little 90-pound ascetic who dismantled all of colonialism without firing a single bullet. Where did that come from? He leaned into the sharp points. For me, I'm not measuring growth when I have it going on. I'm too busy celebrating. Growth comes to me right now because of the cancer. Do you know what? Cancer has done for me what I couldn't do for myself. I've been trying to get rid of my business for 30 years. Cancer said, you got to get rid of the stress. I got rid of the business. Linguistically, I'm able to think, talk, and write now. I never was before because I was too busy with my own schedule. Cancer did for me what I could not do for myself. When I lost my friends, I had the greatest experience in my life. I said, oh my God, loss is a part of life. I don't grow when I'm having a good time, I can tell you that. It's too hedonistic and there's pleasure. But as soon as shit hits the fan, you have finally educated this guy to say, Tom, here's an opportunity. How much have you really learned? Are you really growing? Remember that 90% of life and 10% of what you do with it? So I'll end it with this to answer your question. Who would know that I would ever sit around waiting for shit to hit the fan? Oh my gosh, and it's true. Because it's no longer happening to me, it's happening for me.
All right. Thank you, Tom. That was awesome. So next we have, give me 1 second. Next we have Miss Zara is going to come in. She's coming all the way from Pakistan. Come on in, Zara.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Emra, and thank you, Tom, for your wonderful share. I was actually drowning in self-pity, and your share, like it literally took me out of it. Thank you so much. I have a question, like, how is your step 11 practice these days or today? Yeah. So yes, thank you.
Wow. Such amazing questions. Thank you guys, because, now we're really unpacking. You know how we like to say, we peel away the layers of the onion? When we have this kind of meeting and ask these kind of questions, I like to trade that onion in for an artichoke. Because when you peel away an artichoke, you find a heart. And that's a beautiful question. Thank you. I'm going to tell you specifically in the 12 by 12, the 11th step says, are you ready for this? Go to the ocean and contemplate its mysteries. One of the most powerful meditations is contemplation. There's two kinds. One is trying to quiet your mind through sound bowls and your breath, and the other one is contemplation. And Bill says, go to the ocean and contemplate its mysteries. Meditation has evolved my life more than any other step. I have a relationship with the word intellect now. I didn't even know what that meant before. I have refused chemo and radiation, and even though the cancer's come back, the most current tumor is shrinking. I believe it's because there's no stress, and you taught me how to meditate. Meditation is listening to God, and praying is talking to God. I happen to know a lot about this subject. I won't bore you with it, except to tell you that my peace of mind and my long-term sobriety is all contingent and built upon meditation. And you want to know what my favorite form is? You won't know by me talking. It's listening. And we all learn to meditate without us even realizing we're meditating when we come to our first minute. We're sitting for the first hour listening. We don't even know that our body electric and our biorhythm, the bio is changing. We're listening probably for the first time. I mean, where else do you listen? In court or the DMV, the driver's plate where you get your license? Where else do you sit and listen? You taught me how to be quiet, which I'm going to take advantage of right now.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Let's see. Are you able to take one or two more, Tom?
Oh, man, 100 more. Now you're speaking my language. We're talking recovery now.
All right. Let's see if, I'm not going to ask, but possibly I'm going to call Margaret in a second. But Sally Ann and Jason, if you guys have a question, please feel free to put your hand up. And we have Miss Margaret. Come on in with your question.
Hi there, I'm an alcoholic. Tom, you were amazing. I really enjoyed your share. And I just want to ask one question. How, when you have to learn to, have ego depletion, how can you forgive yourself without your ego getting big? You said the first person you need to forgive is you, but how do you do that without putting your ego up there and thinking you're special because you're forgiving everybody? Do you know what I mean? Instead of them do you know where I'm coming from?
I do, but it sounds like your speaker is cracking, and so it's hard for me to hear. Is it just me? Anybody else? It's hard for me to hear.
Yeah, it was difficult for her to hear. Can you just give us maybe a one sentence with your specific question? Because we can't hear you very well.
With ego depletion, forgiving yourself, how do I stop my ego from rising up again?
Can somebody else help me?
Yeah, the question was, I think what Margaret was trying to say was, how do you keep your ego deflated?
Well, remember I said earlier that I think AA is the best place to come and die, metaphorically speaking, to have an ego death. And the only way I get to smash my ego is in service to others. Getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and driving 100 miles to get a what drunk off the kitchen floor. That crushes my ego. My ego gets right-sized, as it says in the big book a lot, every time I'm in service. And unfortunately, anthropologically speaking, we're in an era of fight or flight. So we're going to defend ourselves even if it kills us. So I'm only able to dismantle something that's much bigger than I am anthropologically when I'm in service to others. Now, we need ego, right? I got a shirt on and I shave. So, I mean, sometimes ego gets a bad rap. When you're self-centered, ego is worse than arsenic. But if you have a sober mind, there's nothing wrong with, putting on a clean shirt, combing your hair, taking a shower.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. I hope that you got your...
Did that help, Margaret?
Okay. I think she's good. Hopefully. Yes. And now we have the Rocket Man. And we will ask him to unmute. Come on in, Jason.
So good to see you again, Tom, and to hear you share, and to watch you walk in the short time I've known you, but watch your actions. And so what I was really curious about was how you arrived at the decision to not take chemo, and what was your process there with God and sponsor. I'm just super curious. I've heard that's a choice that some take, and we're not here forever. And if I was to come to the same situation, I'm super curious.
Wow, that's such an intimate and important question. Even though it's not on the topic of the steps, it actually is. I would not have been able to make that decision if you didn't introduce me to a quality of life. I have been given a quality of life. I've been relieved of the bondage of self. So there's room now to think about other things. And the first thing that comes to mind is how blessed and fortunate I was to no longer be my own worst enemy. Specifically and scientifically, to answer your question, my cancer is head and neck. And most cancers in the body below the neck, there's a lot of real estate. Anything above the neck are 4 of the 5 senses. So radiation and chemo really affect you lose your thyroid, your teeth start to fall out, you lose your eyesight, your salivary glands are gone. Head and neck cancer is not fun. They call it morbidity. And I have to tell you guys, I think you're going to enjoy this. Because I come to AA, I know what it's like to go to a group. I'm not embarrassed or shy anymore. So I started going to these aftercare groups where people who survived head and neck cancer, because I'm used to going to meetings in AA. Is before, right? After the surgery, but before the chemo radiation. And I have to tell you, it was a horror show. It freaked me out. Their jaws were falling apart. They couldn't see anymore. There was no salivary glands. And every time I went to the doctors and explained that, they would say, they're biased. Those are the cases that didn't work. I said, all right, show me the ones that have. Give me the proof like in AA. So they've given me 20 months, 22 months because the cancer came back. And I also have a lot of personal views about the industrial complex of cancer. I love doctors. I have a handful of sponsees for doctors and scientists. But the commercialism of that industry, I can't sign up for. And here, you gave me the ability to think for myself. And I'm not getting on that conveyor belt and told what to do just so they can pay their electricity bill. So the bottom line is, I've been overpaid. The quality of my life is beyond my wildest imagination. Did that help, Jason?
All right. Thank you so much, Tom, and thanks for the question, Jason. Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us today. And next up, we have one of my favorite faithful followers with beautiful red hair. Miss Mary, would you like to come in?
Thank you, my friend Tamra. Tamra, I have to say, you always do a personal greeting to me, and that means so much. That's the beauty of the program, right? Tom, first of all, thank you so very much. I was so many pearls of wisdom I couldn't write fast enough that I want to later contemplate, if you will. You talked about the importance of contemplation, and I was curious as to what conclusions maybe that you've come to regarding how we get chosen to have the gift, all the gifts that are given us through alcoholism and well, not through alcoholism, but through AA.
Well, there's many ways to answer that question. I can give you a canned response, or I can give you my life experience response. And that is more of an esoteric answer. I believe AA is a deeply metaphysical and esoteric wisdom and philosophy for life. We call it a design for living. It's really hard to get to that part, when you're suffering. Yeah. Could you phrase the question again, just so I don't go off on a tangent?
Sure. I often question, the misery that brought me into the rooms, and how, and how did God choose me? How did he choose us to have this experience that is so special that most human beings don't get to have? I contemplate that, and I was wondering if you do too.
Yeah, maybe it's better asked in theological terms. Even in Western theology, which is Christian and Catholic, there is such a thing as reincarnation. They talk about where is heaven, where is hell, and you get to live somewhere else, another life, right? And are we in purgatory? I think, in the Quran, it's really interesting how they talk about we get to go to another place. In Hinduism, it's about reincarnation. In Buddhism, it's the Wheel of Dharma. Does everybody know the movie here? What was it called? Groundhog Day? Yeah. That was written by a guy in the program. Oh. Groundhog Day is based on the Wheel of Dharma in Buddhism. That means if you don't get it right, you have to come back and repeat it. And you notice in the movie, the guy's life doesn't change until he decides to help someone. The Wheel of Dharma. So to answer your question, why are we so lucky? Remember I started off the meeting by saying we're being pulled into our future? Right? I go to about 10 funerals a year. So I have to ask this question all the time. Why didn't they make it? And I believe the people who step over the threshold and are here, it's because you have an obligation to fulfill the rest of your karmic life. Today I don't feel this is mine. I feel like I'm a janitor taking care of this guy. That makes me compassionate for myself. I actually care about Tom. He's my best friend. Before I was so busy personalizing my identity that I didn't even care what I ate. So it's a really important question. I don't know if anyone has the answer to it, but at least in AA, we ask these important questions. We're having these dialogues. And the most important, for a bunch of anarchists who threw their lives away, we've been given the opportunity to ask the most important question anthropologically that has plagued the Homo sapien ever since he arrived, is who is God? And here, from people who have done a good job of destroying their life, we're given the privilege of finding one of our own understanding. Contradictions are amazing in AA. Just real quickly, they say that you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. But then they say, and a couple of pages later, oh, well, but half measures availed us nothing. It's littered with all this playful contradictions, So I don't know if I answered your question. I do know at least that we're on the path and we're asking important questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you for the question, Mary. I think I mentioned this early. We have a parking lot to follow this meeting where you can share. I don't know if Tom's going to stay. Are you available to stay for the parking lot?
It's called service.
All right. So if anyone would like to stay and ask Tom a question or share, you're welcome to have open sharing. It's for 2 minutes. And so I think
just want to say that I'm open to peer criticism.
I want to thank each and every one of you that asked a question, and thank you for participating. And I will turn it back over to my friend Natasha.